Ubisoft has announced and released their all-new logo, which is supposed to represent them creating worlds into the modern era. They've made it more minimalist, and it's supposed to be for their future business, and it is for the better of everyone. Michael here with another topic video. So this is a fun one. Whenever companies end up doing these whole new logos and stuff like that, I love to tear them apart because that's what we love to do. Especially as an artist, I love to look at things and be like, all right, well, what were they thinking for this one? And big companies do not fail to disappoint with all of the jargon that they try to throw out there. It's like, we are creating worlds. We are creating new experiences, and we need a logo to experience that, to teleport players into a whole new world. And it's like, yeah, you made a swivel with some lines. So if you haven't seen the new logo, I'm not going to be negative for this video. Don't worry. That's just the little thing I'm doing at the moment. But yeah, so if you haven't seen the logo, I'll throw it up on screen now, the image that they ended up providing on that blog post and everything. So yeah, it's all right, I guess. But the problem is I don't really see where they're going with it. Now, as somebody who went to graphic design school, I'm not going to be like, oh my God, I'm a master graphic designer and I'm always right. No artist is ever 100% right. Art is subjective and everything. And what you take from it is whatever you take. Like, it's not, nobody's going to tell you, like, this is what it means. And you're going to be like, all right, that's what it means. No, you have your own interpretation. A lot of people have been hating on this logo, quite frankly, and I don't blame them at all. It's not that great because I don't see where they're getting the idea, and I haven't seen anyone get the idea of where they're coming from. So their statement, I'm not going to read the entire thing, but basically it boils down to, we're a company that creates worlds and we wanted a logo to represent that. And so they did all this extra hyperbole that they ended up throwing in there because that's what they do as marketing people. But yeah, basically it runs down to, we wanted a logo that looked like a portal still, because that's what their current logo is, the purple portal and everything. That's the entire point of when they ended up announcing that. They're like, yeah, we wanted to make something that was a portal. And people made fun of that one too, but it's actually not that bad. It's actually quite iconic now. If you end up talking to somebody that plays Ubisoft games, they're like, oh yeah, the purple portal people. Yeah. It's like, yeah, those guys. So yeah, that ends up working for them. And that's actually a system that has been fairly well regarded. I think that's exactly what they ended up needed to do. However, when you go to this logo, it's not something that looks iconic. Sure, I can see where they're getting the portal from, but they're also trying to say it's supposed to represent creativity. Now, as somebody, I went to the wrong door, as somebody who actually made their own logo and actually went towards the idea of being creative, you know, what I ended up doing is I went to sketch an M because my name is Michael. And so I'm like, hey, I want to do an M and I want it to look a little bit sketchy, but I also want it structured. I thought of like, hey, if I'm stuck in the middle of an island and all I got is wood planks, you know, if I wanted to make a logo out of it, what would I do? And so I ended up sketching it, and that's what ended up being my logo. Obviously, I did some modifications to it. I modified the weights. I ended up moving it around, and there's a lot of small things that I ended up doing. But there's a difference between me and a large company doing it and the problem with this specific logo. The specific logo, if you didn't end up looking at it enough, I ended up throwing it up on screen again, because why not? Basically, the ends are completely flat. And so basically, it's like somebody took noodles that have flat ends and then kind of twirled them around a little bit. And the weights are all the same. It's all an equal weight. The idea of creativity is normally brought through the idea of imperfection. However, this logo is too perfect for that. And I'm not the only one that has ended up bringing this up either. A lot of art critics have been looking at it recently and they're like, yeah, it looks too perfect to be an idea of creativity. Now, obviously, like I said near the beginning, I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm perfect and everything. Everyone's going to be like, yeah, my idea of art is perfect. And it's like, no, nobody's idea is perfect. And I'm sure the people who made it thought that it did. And I'm sure the execs that ended up okaying it, yeah, they probably did as well. They're like, yeah, it looks creative. Let's go for it. Because the idea for imperfection for them is probably the idea that ended up squaring off. And the square is strange. They did this sort of thing to where it has like this sort of overlap on the top side. And this is actually the cool thing about this is the fact that they actually did try to implement this into the text. And this is something that a lot of people are overlooking. It is still a portal and then Ubisoft. It's not just the portal anymore. It is portal and then the word Ubisoft. And so they both go hand in hand. Now, obviously, the portal itself is going to be used in a lot of other cases. But for the most part, they are supposed to go hand in hand, and they will for every single game title and everything. And they actually implemented that into the O as well. And so they shifted it over on the O. And I think that's a cool little touch. It's a typography touch. Probably not difficult to do whatsoever. In fact, I could do that in 2 seconds in Photoshop. But the idea is, or Illustrator, depending on your tools. And so, like, yeah, it's not that complicated, but it is something they were at least trying to implement it into the rest of it. It does end up tying it in together a little bit more. But at the same time, there's no point to it. I don't get the idea and their direction. Now, I do understand, however, and I normally end up standing on the opposite side of this argument because I do understand the idea that companies need to simplify their logos and do this minimalist style. The reason we end up doing that is because a lot of our modern design is kind of simplified. We do a lot of the simplified stuff and more monochromatic and everything like that to where that's kind of how branding ends up having to go these days, just because that's the way websites are designed, where everyone is trying to make vectors. I remember when I was back in graphic design school, and still to this day, whenever I talk to professionals, they're always like, a logo needs to work in black and white, no matter what. Like, if you're working for a company, a logo should work in black and white. And if it doesn't, it's not a logo, it's an illustration. And so that was always the differentiation for me personally. And so I've always ended up looking at that. And the Ubisoft portal, while it is cool, and I think it is iconic, it isn't minimalist, and they can't really use those sort of design elements on that sort of portal. It always ends up looking out of place in a lot of their modern designs. You can end up looking at the latest Far Cry announcement, for example, where they just use straight cut lines and everything is clean. And while I'm not 100% a fan of this, I do like kind of runging up the edges and kind of doing some weird graphical stuff. I really, really love Gothic design, and so I always try to implement that into my own design, stuff like that, for my own game project right now. I just finished working on some UI concepts that I'm going to be implementing into Unreal Engine 4, and I'm so excited for it. But yeah, staying on topic, I think we can end up doing this clean-cut and minimalist idea while still keeping detail. It's not all about throwing away detail, and that's what I hate the most about all these modern logos, and especially this one. This one doesn't feel creative. It feels uncreative. It feels the opposite of creative. It is like taking a creative idea and then stripping it of everything that is creative about it and throwing it in a machine and telling the machine to do the work for you. And that is what I don't like about a lot of modern design. And they're not the only company that's guilty of this, but they are the most recent one. Now, a lot of people have been stating a lot of things, and they actually did a whole blog post about this, and they were talking about like how people were giving it criticism and calling it poop and everything. They're like, oh yeah, it's poop, but just like from a top angle. And so somebody made an image to where it was like, you know, a little turd or whatever, and it was like, here's the top view, and then here's the side view, and it was like, ha ha, lol, lol. And yeah, you know what? I could see it. And that's going to happen with every single logo out there. And everyone's going to have these criticisms, but it's the general idea of it that I really don't like. And I don't see a point to it either. The portal is already iconic in their own sense. People who play Ubisoft games know the portal. What are those people going to do when they end up seeing the new logo? Probably not much, to be honest. But for the most part, they won't think of them as the purple portal people. They'll actually think of it as a different company. I remember back in the day when, let's say, like Electronic Arts, for example, ended up changing their logo. They still had EA in the name and everything, but when they saw the new logo, they're like, oh, it's a different company. Or EA Sports, for example. I had a ton of friends back in the day that were just casual gamers, and this still happens today as well. I don't really talk with a lot of my non-gamer friends these days, but there were a lot of non-gamers that don't necessarily understand the whole idea of a single company and everything like that, and they don't understand the idea of publishers and developers being different. And so they would see like EA Sports and EA as two completely different companies, which now they were the same company. They were different publishing branch, sure, but they were still the same company, and they still would end up being even like the same game might even made by the same developer. And so basically it would be like, yeah, they're made by the same people. And like, what? No, it's a different company. And it's like, no, but yeah, people don't get it. So branding shifts are risky. Now, Ubisoft has obviously gone down a few different transitions. There's obviously other companies that do it a lot, but one of the companies I always like to point to, or a few of the companies I always like to point to when they end up doing these sort of upgrades to the logo, is Nintendo and Sega. Now, they're Japanese companies, and they have a lot of sort of older style design ideas, and so they always want to keep their retro aspects intact, but they've updated their logo hundreds of times. But nobody's really noticed because, for one, they don't make a big deal about it. They probably post it on their blog or their kind of outlets and things like that, I'm sure. But for the most part, they don't over like shadow it or anything like that. And they're like, hey guys, look at this new thing we made. Love it or hate it. No care. Hey, you know, it's all marketing. But for the most part, for like, you know, let's say Sega's logo has been updated like 20 times over the last 20 years, and nobody's really noticed because they keep the general theme going, and they just kind of modernize it a little bit. They clean it up. The modern Sega logo is a little bit more cleaner. Their introductions have gotten a little bit cleaner. The newer Sega game intros look interesting and things. So yeah, it's a nice little transition, and that's what I feel like companies should be doing. They shouldn't be doing this whole, like, we're going to completely drastically change it, but they should be doing these smaller, kind of bringing it up to date and stuff like that. And if you are going to do a change, do a drastic change that actually has an impact. Don't do something that's, like, uniconic. Do something that's going to be iconic. Be like, this is the next evolution. This is where game design is going. And be like, yeah, that's where we're going. So I like the idea of the portal. I think it's kind of dumb that they're still going with the whole portal idea. That's what they were already doing. If they were trying to do a whole drastic shift, I don't know why they wouldn't just end up changing the entire thing. And I don't get the whole idea. And I don't think it looks like a portal. It just looks like a swirl. And the swirl looks off. I wish they would add in some like line weights. Modify the weights, make it go to a point, make it, you know, once again, I'm just shouting to absolutely nobody. Nobody's ever going to listen to this that actually works at Ubisoft. But for the most part, you know, I think that there's a lot that could be done with it. And I do want to add as a side point on how the whole graphic design kind of world works. Normally, it comes down to a bunch of people make a bunch of logos. They end up presenting it to the execs, and the execs pick one that they like. And they're always going to pick the worst of the selection. And so let's say you have 3 logos. One of them is going to be absolutely terrible. This is why you need to make at least 3 great logos when you work in the graphic design industry, because they're always going to pick the worst one. The worst product is always going to get picked. The worst idea is always going to get picked. Well, maybe not always. Every once in a while, they'll have some sort of design sense, or maybe they'll end up listening to you and your advice and be like, oh, well, I ended up presenting you to this one. You liked it. But this one, I just now realized has this aspect. And sometimes they'll listen to you, but it's pretty rare. But for the most part, that's probably what happened here as well. There's probably like over 1,000 logos that were made. Like at least 1,000. Like that is the bare minimum that would have ended up being made for this sort of situation. And that one just ended up getting picked. And so that's what they ended up going with. And I think it'll probably end up changing eventually. I think a lot of these modern logos will end up changing. Like we can just look at the Microsoft change logo that they ended up doing. They changed the logo to be Microsoft with a little cross in it. And then it lasted not even an entire year. And then they ended up changing it again because they're like, yeah, that wasn't working for us. So we went back to the Windows logo and it's like, yeah, whatever. So yeah, it's one of those things to where, yeah, it'll probably be around for a little while. Ultimately, it doesn't affect anything. It's not going to affect the quality of their games. And some people have been kind of making jokes. Oh, the logo's broken, just like their games. Not all their games is broken. They release some good games as well. And every developer, or not developer, every publisher ends up publishing a few broken games because of the whole way AAA marketing works. But that's a whole topic for another video. And maybe we'll end up talking about it in a future one. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Maybe for that topic I just suggested. And also, game in the background has been Phantasy Star Universe. I literally just started recording just immediately after another video I just ended up completing. And so basically, yeah, my voice is just going to come back into play. My voice has been screwed up for the last few days, so I'm just kind of like sitting here just recording videos. And so, yeah, we'll go for that. I missed a few topics over the week, so I'm going to go back and like cover up a bunch of those and kind of release them overall. And they're not a bunch of like super in-depth topics or anything like that, and so I probably won't even do videos of most of them, but there's a few that I want to kind of do my thoughts on. The other one I released, I don't know which one of these is releasing first. I think I'm going to release the other one first, but the one before this was Dragonmon Hunters was shutting down and stuff like that, and that was kind of sad. But yeah, anyways, Phantasy Star Universe, game in the background. It's an old MMO I used to play, but this is just a single player because they shut down the MMO version. I still miss this game. Single player is still fun. It's just a very simple game. I don't know. It has some in-depth RPG mechanics and stuff like that, and in the online version, they actually had a lot of cool stuff going on for it, but servers are dead, and nobody's ended up kind of bringing it in so that we could end up playing any of the online content offline, really. So there's like somebody that ended up making a few of the kind of portals and everything, some of the few levels, and like, yeah, it's all right, but I really just want the online experience again. I wish developers would end up throwing these back. And Ubisoft is guilty of this too, shutting down online games and stuff like that. Although I think EA is the worst when it comes to this. They'll shut it down anything. But yeah, anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Also, if you want to look at my logo, it's literally in the thumbnail. It's an M, and I sketched it. I sketched over like 50 M's to try and get that one. I'm like, I like this one, because I was going through a bunch of different ideas. I actually went for a cat paw once. And I was going to do a cat paw, and I was going to have it like scratching, and I was going to have like an M in it, kind of like sort of transitioned into it. And then I was like, you know what? There's no reason for that, because what if I become an old man and I have some traumatic event that makes me hate cats, and I'll just regret it for the rest of my life? So I went with M, because M is part of language, and language isn't changing. I lied. Language is always changing. Don't quote me on that.